Welcome into One Winning Pod, where we'll discuss the Seahawks playing at the bank for a very exciting game. I'm looking forward to it. This is a good team playing good ball. Pretty holistic. No bad side, no good side of the team. 9th in DVOA, 10th on offense, 16th on defense, 11th special teams, so well-rounded. And they just were able to get a come-from-behind victory against the Browns, 24-20 in Seattle, to improve the record to 5-2. Guys, how are you feeling about this first game altogether? Do you think we're going to be able to get out of there unscathed?
I'm excited for this game. I could see this game being a game where the Ravens come out and just roll. And similar to what we saw against Detroit, I could see this game going close. It in a lot of ways, it feels very similar to that Detroit game, right? This is team, the Seahawks, just like the Lions last year, came out and were a lot more competitive than people expected. You saw a career resurgence for their starting quarterback. I mean, Jared Goff for the Lions, Geno Smith for the Seahawks. I think Geno Smith digging himself out of a bigger hole than Goff had to, though. I mean, no one saw Geno coming in and doing what he did at the beginning of last year. And also really tough defense, like we're saying. A defense that, when researching, they've been really good in the second half. They have not allowed a touchdown over the past 4 games and have only allowed 1 field goal in the fourth quarter in their last 4 games. Like, this defense, they've been stepping up big time. And, of course, their offense, you got plenty of players there who can really give you a defense headache with Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, other guys that we'll talk about too. Yeah, I don't know what to expect with this game because I think that the Ravens have a great roster, but so does this team. So it's going to be it's really shaping out to be a great matchup.
Yeah, so coming into it, Seahawks are 5-2, so their only 2 losses. Week 1, lost to the Rams at home, 30-13. It was actually quite a big loss, and then a road loss to the Bengals. I think that was the first game the Bengals kind of got back on track. But other than that, a couple of wins. I mean, there's some good ones. Obviously, I think the win last week over the Browns, that was a good win. They did beat the Lions in that shootout that went into overtime week 2 as well. We were actually just kind of talking about that a couple weeks ago. But through that as well, I mean, they've had a couple of wins against some lesser opponents as well. The Panthers, the Giants, the Cardinals. They kind of round things out. But they've proven it against some level of competition. Obviously, like you said, the Lions are a good team, even though we kind of steamrolled them a few weeks ago with some flukes, I think. Still kind of remains to be seen, I think, with the Lions where they're going to end up. But still, I mean, it's a good mix. I mean, I think you could say the same thing about the Ravens. We won some games against some good opponents, but lost some games we probably should have won. So, I think coming into it, they're, pretty evenly matched in terms of expectations. So anything can happen.
Certainly are. This is a team that has some great playmakers on both sides of the ball. I think if we look at the offense first, a lot of these takes will come with the lens of what I saw, at least for my takes, like what I saw in the game against the Browns, but also overall overarching narratives I've heard about the Seahawks throughout the year and bits and pieces I've seen. And basically, it looks to me that getting the Geno Smith will be a real key to the game because he seems to be a guy that disproportionately plays poor under pressure. Everyone usually plays worse under pressure. Sometimes you have these games where players have better stats against pressure. Maybe they found the right wide receiver, get big plays, etc. But it seems like Geno has some bad decision making. He's been a little loose with the ball lately, a little bit more interceptions, and he definitely seemed susceptible to bad decision making, particularly on third down when he got pressured. So I think those high leverage downs and Geno Smith's performance there will really be a huge key to the game. And if the Ravens aren't able to get home against their offensive line, which I think looks pretty decent, then that could be problematic.
Well, I mean, again, another parallel between this matchup and the Detroit matchup, right? I mean, that's what we're saying about Goff, right? If he's back there safe in the pocket and everything is unfolding in front of him like it should, then he's going to pick apart a defense. But get pressure on him, then some turnovers can happen. And I mean, to Smith's credit, really hasn't had that many turnovers this year. Although the past couple games, 5 interceptions after only throwing 1 through the first 4. So there is a little bit of an uptick there. Maybe there's something there on film that the Ravens can see, that something might have been cracked there, and the defenses are picking up on an exact thing that you can do to really rattle him. But yeah, I agree 100%. This is a tough offensive line to do it against, but to have success in this game, the defense is going to need to get to Geno. They're going to need to confuse him. They're going to need to fluster him. He's not a guy who can go out of the pocket and scramble around and make something happen when the pocket collapses. So, yeah, that's going to be a huge key here. Get to Geno, make sure that he can't get the ball to the playmakers out there, of which the Seahawks have plenty.
Yeah, I mean, certainly kind of throw some names out there. Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet, I think are a good running back duo. And then, your trio of wide receivers, obviously you have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett has been around for quite a while, and rookie Jackson Smith, Najigba, to kind of round out those guys. All really good weapons. Honestly, I think that's probably one of the better, cores on the offense to surround Geno. I think it's, certainly in a good situation. Metcalf is the guy who kind of like, similar to AJ Brown from the Eagles, but just an absolute physical freak, can, really do some damage in a lot of different ways. I mean, he's super strong. He can win those 50-50 balls if you need him. Super fast as well. Lockett's just been kind of one. He kind of reminds me a little bit of shouldn't remember the name. The guy from the Bengals, not Chase, not Boyd, Tyler Boyd, kind of like one of those guys who like hasn't been maybe one of the top producer, kind of top physical guy in terms of the wide receiver position, but just super reliable, a guy you can really count on in certain situations. I mean, he had been their number one prior to Metcalf getting there, pretty productive in that role. So similar to Boyd, I think, in that. But I don't know if you guys wanted to talk about any of them in particular, but yeah, just wanted to throw out for mine. It's a pretty good. Pretty good core on the offense. I think there's a lot of guys I think the Ravens should be concerned about.
Man, do I ever want to talk about these guys? Oh, man. What a unit of wide receivers, okay? First of all, Lockett had a huge game against the Browns. He was able to get a lot of passes in every level of the defense, and he's really well known for those like moon balls that Russell Wilson used to throw and coming down under him and all that. But he is a total wide receiver, complete game, and just like Mr. Reliable. And then you have DK Metcalf, who I think would be the most interesting person to meet in real life, like from like I want to see an athletic specimen perspective. Like, this guy is a freak. He's so big and he's fast. And it's just like unbelievable watching him. Like, I was just impressed watching him all over again. He just like doesn't look real. He looks like a fake player made in Madden. He just doesn't look real, man. And then JSN remind me a lot of Zay. He had a lot of similar, he's not like, bust out of your shoes explosive twitchy, but he's just very smooth and very like good with leverage and being able to wind through defenses. And I think he's starting to really turn on now, coming off that broken wrist. I can see how, it took him a couple of weeks, but he's getting there now, right? He's looking a lot better. So I think JSN is going to be an interesting guy to pay attention to. And then you look at the running backs. Ken Walker, explosive plays, good, one-cut ability going downhill. And then Sharps, he had a decent run in this game as well. Looked good. Kind of unfair to have two running backs like that in one backfield. But I guess that's what happens when you spend 2 seconds on running backs. Like, they'll probably actually be pretty good. And what that results in is an offense that's very built on explosive plays. So they actually get a lot of explosives. They kind of live and die by the explosives. And they're able to produce them. So huge attack. And let's put one more name out there. Jake Bobo, camp darling. You might have heard about him during camp. This guy is turning it on. The last couple of games, being involved in end arounds. He's getting other catches, touchdowns. This guy's a little bit of a threat too. So I want to Bobo watch, man. Like, it's not just a fake name. It's not like Puka Nacua, also another fake name. No, Jake Bobo, real guy, doing things.
Yeah, Jake Bobo, not to be confused with Boba Fett of Star Wars, but yeah, man, one of the things I really appreciate going to a game of course, it's number one is to see the Ravens, and hopefully they put on a great performance this game. But it's always great when you go into a game and you're just like, man, who are the players on the opposite team that like you're gonna go see? And it might be the only opportunity you have in your life to see some of these guys. And I am so excited to watch the Seattle Seahawks playmakers run around on the field and do nothing with the football because the Ravens defense is so dominant. But I mean, it's just incredible to see all the names that this Seahawks franchise has been able to put together. They all do something different. Even when you just look at the running backs, Kenneth Walker, he's got a lot of speed, but he's an inside guy, a bruiser. He can really work well in the power running game. He's gotten a lot of touchdowns so far for the Seahawks this year. But Charbonnet is a very different style of runner, very much more of an outside threat, can catch balls, really has great moves from running back position. I mean, gosh, when we were talking about the looking at the draft class, doing the draft preview episode, we really liked Charbonnet. I think it was him and Spears that we had at the top of the boards as like the guys to get in this draft. If you weren't going to get Bijan or Gibbs, obviously. I mean, everyone had those guys ahead. But yeah, I don't think that the Ravens have faced an offense this year with this many options that you have to keep track of. The closest probably would be Cincinnati, but I mean, Cincinnati wasn't at full strength in that game. So I don't know if that's a full comparison and a full expectation of what we could see. I mean, even the Lions, even though they have St. Brown and Laporta and Gibbs, the rest of the guys on their offense, particularly with Montgomery out, were just guys, right? Guys are pretty replaceable. I don't think any of these guys are replaceable on this offense. I think they all do something really, really well, and that's going to be a real challenge for this defense. Who do you focus on, right? What do you take away? If you take away Metcalf, is Lockett going to eat you alive, in those soft spots in the zone? And then if you try and focus on him, well, are you putting yourself one-on-one on Metcalf? Are you forgetting about Charbonnet coming out of the backfield? It's going to be really interesting to see what the Ravens' defensive game plan is against this offense.
Yeah, especially just I feel like you kind of have to start with Metcalf too, right? I mean, I don't think the Ravens have anybody who can match up one-on-one like as much as we've talked about Humphrey being this physical player. He maybe not at the strength he normally would be, having had the injury earlier in the season, not getting to kind of full strength later. But even then, I mean, just a guy of Metcalf's size and speed strength combo. Even if Marlowe was full strength, I feel like one-on-one, that's probably a really tough matchup for him. He seems like a player that honestly the Ravens have to decide if they want to probably have bracket coverage for, just kind of dedicate two guys to his side of the field and then just play matchup on everybody else. It wouldn't surprise me if, for example, you want to put, either Hamilton or Stone just kind of over there pretty much the whole game and just have everyone else try to do their best in terms of one-on-one matchups. Obviously I think the good thing for the Ravens is they're coming in with a defensive line that's been performing really, really well. So the more pressure you can get on those guys, I think the secondary will have an easier time. But I fully expect, like, if the Ravens want to decide to play one guy on him the whole game, they better hope that they're getting home, because otherwise, like, Geno can throw it up and he's probably going to come down with it and make some big plays.
The other thing that's going to be difficult for this defense, this is a good offensive line. This is a good offensive line that the Seahawks have put together here. There's only been one game this season where Geno has been sacked more than twice. He was sacked 4 times against Cincinnati. Against Cleveland, we know that Cleveland has a really strong defensive line. Only 1 sack did they give up. Reading through some articles today by Seahawks beat writers and fans, it seems like pass protection is where this unit's strength really is. And that's not to say that they're bad at run protection, but certainly there's much more consistency there with the pass protection. And I mean, when you watch the games, you can see it. You can see it. Geno, he's got time to throw. He's got a pocket of guys around him, and I don't really know if there's anyone on this group that you can really attack. I mean, obviously they've got Charles Cross at left tackle. He was a hype draft pick last year, so he's a guy that people know. But Yeah, this is a really solid offensive line that the defense is going to go against. So that's going to make getting to Geno even harder because it's not just Geno you got to rattle, you got to get past the guards too.
Indeed, this is a great line. That's one thing I noticed in this game popped off the field to me is that they were able to move the defensive line for the Browns on some of these running plays and be able to get big gains, particularly in key situations, key running downs, third and short. They were able to do the thing, and then also they did good in pass protection. But they could be had with numbers. That's kind of one thing I did notice, and that's not like particularly unusual, but it might be the way that we have to get pressure is by bringing numbers and then hoping for the best. So we'll see if we're able to generate much pass rush with just 4 or 5, 3 or 4. But yeah, definitely so astute, man. Like I looked at it, I was like, how much draft capital they put in? Not much. Well, very thrifty. Obviously Cross was a super high draft pick, and that's kind of what you have to do for a good left tackle these days. But Damian Lewis, 3rd round pick, kind of a high 3rd round pick. So, that's kind of some serious draft capital. Then you got Evan Brown, nothing, undrafted. And then you got Phil Haynes, 4th round pick, kind of a late 4th round pick too, out of the top 100, 124. And then their right tackle, Forsyth, I remember talking about him when we were doing our draft preview in 2021, 6th round pick, but he's a starting offensive tackle now and playing well. So there you go. Like, they were able to find the right guys and mostly young. Well done. Love that for them.
Except for future Hall of Famer backup card, Jason Peters on his 20th season or something ridiculous.
Oh man, he's there right now. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think I read if he ends up getting a start, I think he'll be the 2nd oldest offensive lineman ever start a game, I think. And the other one is some lineman who played in the 20s. So very, very different game.
This guy's 41, yo. Oh man.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But yeah, I definitely think it's a good offensive line. Noah Fant doesn't scare me. The tight end group in general doesn't really scare me too much. So we'll get to see though. Maybe Noah Fant will be able to have a good game and kind of continue this little tight end streak that's going against the Ravens, which is so interesting, right? Because we have exact kind of players you want to turn down tight ends, but maybe just the way we're scheming it up right now, it's they're getting targeted a little bit more lately.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's a good point that you bring up. Once again, Fountain has been able to have a couple big plays this year. Seems like he has 1 or 2 a game. And what's the real thing helping him? Just like we're saying, all the attention is on all these other playmakers for the defense. So that's given him some good opportunities for some one-on-one coverage, some spots where he's wide open on the field and able to run with the football a little bit. So yeah, that's something the Ravens will have to keep in mind there.
Well, moving on to the defense, it's another group. I think they've got quite a bit of young players. I think are doing really well. I think one of the guys to kind of start with, Boye Mafe, been a great player for them on the defensive line. Already has 5 sacks on the year. Really looking well. I mean, he was another relatively high draft pick. A guy I think we were talking about a couple of years ago.
Sure did.
Yeah, but he's looking pretty good. They also have guy Jaron Reed as well in the defensive line, 4 sacks this year already. So they can get after it. Their pass rush is pretty good. And yeah, I think starting with those guys, we should probably go in a little bit more detail.
Well, yeah, I mean, you kind of said it there, man. Boye Mafe is a unit, dude. Definitely one of those kind of guys where you watch the game and you're like, okay, that was a tackle. Right, but it was a tackle, if only the box score could tell you how good this guy plays in some of these plays. Yeah, he's a real deal, man. I thought he was a difference maker. I thought he looked like a should have been a 1st round pick, not 40th overall. I mean, it's 1st round light, but it's he's a serious talent. Yeah. He's playing well, and then Jaron Reed as well, 4 sacks, like you said. He's a guy that kind of reminds me a little bit of, how Pierce is playing this year. Just getting in there, blowing up plays. I think, and then behind them, they have good linebackers, man. They hunt. So, I think this is a good defense, too. They're not getting gaudy numbers. They're not like the Ravens. They've been able to let up some more points. And I don't think they're as good as the Ravens, but they have talent at every level that needs to be accounted for.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you know, we're talking about the young guys on this defense, and for good reason. I mean, they have a lot of ascending stars who are freak athletes and technicians that are guys that the Ravens are going to have to keep an eye out for and figure out where they are on the field at all time. But I mean, you can't forget when you talk about this defense, the anchor in the middle, who's been the anchor for this defense for quite some time, with the exception of last year, where he took a brief visit to LA, but is back again. And that's Bobby Wagner. He is once again leading this team in tackles. He's got a couple sacks on the year already as well as just some pass deflection last week. And, you know, we've seen it with Roquan, obviously, and how this interior linebacker position, it's not dead yet in the NFL. Maybe it's not as important in some other team defenses as it is in others, but like Baltimore, Seattle's another team that really makes use of that position, and it's a strength of their defense. And he's another guy out there that the Ravens are going to have their eye on. Bobby Wagner, even at the age of 33, he's still a guy who can come out and wreck plays, and he's just going to be a really solid force for this defense in the matchup, in my opinion.
One thing I forgot to mention, actually, relatively recent, Leonard Williams, also a newcomer to the defensive line, traded from the Jets just a couple hours ago. So I remember from his time, I think both from the Giants and the Jets. Giants first and then traded the Jets later. Another guy probably to keep out for. I remember him being a good run stuffer. I think he's not so much as of an impact on the pass rush, but still, I think, adding onto that group, I think it becomes pretty good. One thing I did notice just about some size of the guys here, it might actually be a good opportunity kind of for the Ravens to go a little bit more power heavy for this game, maybe to rely on Gus a little bit more maybe for this game. Defensive interior, while they're really good on the pass rush, they're a little bit undersized. So even Jaron Reed, 6'3", 306 pounds, like it's a big defensive tackle, but that ain't like a Michael Pierce defensive tackle. A little bit smaller for that. So, it'll be curious to see how the Ravens want to attack it. I think they're somewhat similar, I think, to Arizona, and just a little bit undersized on defensive line. So, they've had success against teams like that in the past, but obviously the talent level here is a little bit different, but yeah, we'll see.
I think it's a pretty good observation there. And you look at it and you look at the teams that they've had to play so far. Really, the teams that they've played really don't. It's either not really their style to play that type of bully ball, or they just don't have the players for it. Their schedule, they've played, the Rams so far. They played the Lions when David Montgomery was out. The Panthers, the Bengals really aren't having too much success with Mixon so far this year. So, I mean, that is, when you're looking for an edge where you might have on this defense, I think that's a really interesting one that you just pointed out there. And, I mean, look, Gus is warmed up. It took him a little bit to find his footing in this offense, but yeah, he had a great week against Detroit, built on it against Arizona. Hey, maybe we see him go for over 100 this game. That could be a good spot to attack this defense, is with some more Gus bus.
I think that's a good point that you bring out. And one thing I noticed when I watched the game and then I looked at the snap counts to kind of better understand is that they actually use a lot of lighter personnel than most teams. Like, we're not just talking nickel. They do some dime. They have safeties. They have 3 safeties that they use a lot. Like, their lowest used safety has 67% of snaps. So you're seeing a decent amount of 3 safety looks. And similarly, they have a lot of corners that they get run. They have like a slot corner they use a good amount too. You're seeing some of these later fronts, and I think we might be able to run on it. And you also see that they really lean on certain guys to play a high level amount of snaps, like Boy Mafe, Reed. Those guys are playing 3/4 of the snaps. So that's a lot for those kind of players, and you might be able to wear them out if you do a power running game.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think before we kind of move on the offense, we should probably point out some of the names in the secondary too. Now, you mentioned the sort of nickel and dime looks that they like to go in the back end, but secondary is probably one of the best I think the Ravens have probably faced all year. Devin Witherspoon, and Tariq Woolen, great cornerback combo. And like you said, I like the three safety combos you're kind of talking about: Condre Diggs, Jamal Adams, Julian Love. I mean, that's a really great secondary between those guys. Lots of playmakers. Obviously, last year as a rookie, Tariq Woolen kind of stole the show, kind of became one of the best cornerback stories in the league besides Sauce Gardner. And Witherspoon this year, I believe, has kind of come off to a great start. So, yeah, certainly lots of talented guys in the secondary. I think the receiving core is going to have their work cut out for them this week. But I think it's I think that this will be a good opportunity. I think for Monken to bring out some new wrinkles to the offense that they haven't seen before, kind of change some things up on tape for them. Certainly, I think it's not impossible. I think the Ravens have played a lot of good defenses before, but it'll be a good test for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, Witherspoon, gosh, if you watched any of that awful, they wanted to call it a football game with the Seahawks and the Giants a few weeks ago, that Monday night game. Not terribly much to watch, but man, Witherspoon definitely put on a show. He had a sack in that game and an interception. He might have returned it for a touchdown. He had a pretty big interception return in that game, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, this is another reason I think that the power running game is something that the Ravens might need to lead on, because the Seahawks secondary, they've really been shutting down some pretty prominent passing attacks this year. Cincinnati, they got off to a fast start against Seattle, but then after the first quarter, the defense really clamped down, and Burrow, he got held to under 200 yards passing in that game, in a game that was in Cincinnati. That was what the Seahawks were able to do on the road. I mean, the Rams were able to have success against them, but that was in the first week of the season. So, that was a while ago. I mean, the other thing you could argue here, though, is outside of the Bengals and the Rams and the Lions, not really great passing attacks you're going against. So, Carolina, P.J. Walker led Browns, the Cardinals, we saw that last week, the Giants. So, like we've been talking about how the Ravens really haven't been challenged too much by an offense that has a lot of playmakers. The Seahawks, conversely, while this unit is really good from a passing perspective, they haven't really had to face that many tests themselves against teams that have a lot of options there in the passing attack. So that's something else to look at. But yeah, I mean, I still think, though, you look at what they did at Cincinnati. Granted, they were coming off a bye week, but you look at that, and that really has me nervous for how the Ravens are going to fare from a passing perspective against this team. I think you're right. Monken's going to have to come up with something that we haven't seen yet to throw these guys off guard, because just doing what we've been doing, that's probably not going to be enough to have consistent, sustained success in this game.
Well, I'll leave you with this. One thing I noticed is that they can be had if you can find the soft spots in zones. That seems to be their kind of their weak spot. Maybe they don't trade off the zones quite as cleanly, and I think guys like Mark Andrews can really exploit that. But we need to see other people do it too. Anyone is fine, right? So maybe that's a good opportunity for Odell, because he might have that veteran savviness. Might be good for Zay because he's smooth. It could be good for Bate. I'll just game off of Odell. It could be anybody. But I think that's going to be a key to the game.
Bold predictions?
I guess I can get started. I don't, man. I feel like I've been picking against the Ravens. I think a little bit. I picked them against them with the Lions. I guess I did pick for them against Arizona because we were all kind of agreed on that. Man, it's going to be hard for this one. It's a game I certainly think the Ravens can win. I think that they have won 3 in a row, but then again, still some question marks. I guess Ravens podcast. I feel like gotta pick the Ravens to win. I'll say this. I'll say 27-17 Ravens. I think they'll pull it out. I'm gonna say, for my bold prediction, I'm gonna say I do. I think this will be a good breakout game for Bateman. I think he'll end up getting a touchdown this game. Actually, I don't think. Yeah, he doesn't have one on the year,
Doesn't.
I believe.
Nope.
I'm gonna say he ends up with a touchdown. Probably over 50 yards receiving and a touchdown.
What I think is going to be interesting with this game, and we'll see how it actually, turns out once the teams are playing. I think we're going to see what lessons the Ravens learned from the games against the Colts and against the Steelers, where they were not able to make the decisive play that they needed to on offense to put the team away. Because I think this is going to be a close game. I think this is going to be a close battle. And honestly, I look at the Seahawks, I look at the Ravens, and take it from an unbiased perspective, I actually don't know which team is better. I think these are two very evenly matched teams. Lamar is definitely a better quarterback than Geno Smith is, but I think there's other areas of the Seahawks roster that you could say they're slightly better than the Ravens. But it's going to be a close game, in my opinion. I'm going to give the edge to the Ravens simply because it's a home game and because in a clutch situation, I think I trust Lamar more than I would trust Geno Smith to make a play. So I'll give the Ravens a 23-20 win. And I just really love what Chris pointed out here with the fact that this really looks like a game where the Ravens could really dominate with a strong rushing attack, particularly one that's between the tackles. Gus, he had 64 yards against the Lions, 80 against the Cardinals. Let's get him over 100 this game, 100-plus yards on the ground for Gus.
Man.
Well, it's going to be tough for how all these things happen unless the Ravens really succeed. But I like what you're thinking, Chris, with the Bateman touchdown. I was leaning that way. I was going to enumerate that he would get 60 yards catching and a touchdown. But now that that's off the table, I'm going to say I bet it last week. It didn't happen, and I wanted to go with bait this week. So maybe, who knows, hopefully that still does happen. But I'm going to go with Odell does finally get his touchdown. Kind of go back to saying, like, you get Bateman involved, Odell can have his too. And that would be significant because the Ravens only have 3 wide receiver touchdowns receiving this year. All the rest have gone to that one guy named Mark Andrews, who's dominating with 6 already in the year, having a great year. So I want to see the wide receivers get more touchdowns. So I'm going to say the wide receivers get 2 touchdowns in this game, which will almost match their season output.
Man, that is pretty incredible. Are the other 2, is it just Aguilar?
2 to Aguilar, 1 to Zay.
1 to Zay. That's right. Yeah.
Yep. So, and as for score, okay. So this is why I think the Ravens are going to win. I think that if you say good player, great player, the numbers are similar. But I think if you add in star player, where they just shine a little bit brighter, the Ravens have more shine brighter players on both sides of the ball, and that are I think truly best in class at their position, and that's why they're going to win. So Ravens win this game, and I think it's going to be in a better fashion. I think they're going to still put up 30. So I'm going to say they're going to go get another 31 spot, but we'll feel happier about it because of quality of opponent and game flow. And I think the Seahawks are going to be struggling at 17. I think that this might be a big win for the Ravens, another kind of pseudo statement win. Well, what do you guys think? Love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment on the video if you're watching on YouTube, or send us a note on Twitter or Threads at @1pod, or even email us. You can write us a novel if you want on @1pod@gmail.com. No character limits there. We'll talk to you next week, hopefully after a big win at home against the Seahawks. Go Ravens.